Hello, and welcome to my presentation on the best practices in strategic management and competitive globalization by me, Molly Troop, for my Management 545 class at California Intercontinental University. Strategy and the strategic management process. Barney and Hesterly defined strategy as the theory about how to gain competitive advantages. Now, what are competitive advantages? Abdullah and Arapin published in the European Research Studies in 2017 that competitive advantages are conditions or abilities that allow companies to continuously generate higher sales and profits than its competitors. Competitive advantages play into a company's strategy. A company will either have an emergent or an intended strategy. Intended strategies are those that the company is built on. An example of this is Southwest Airlines' intended strategy to provide low-cost flights to customers in the southwest region of the United States. An emergent strategy, for example, is Johnson & Johnson's move from solely producing medical gauze and medical plasters into other healthcare industries, such as the pharmaceutical industry, by purchasing Janssen Pharmaceuticals. In order to understand how a company's strategy, and thus their competitive advantages, fit into an industry, they have to evaluate the external industry environment that they are in. A company will also have to evaluate the internal capabilities and limitations of the company and the industry they are in. One thing that can be helpful during these evaluations are SWOT analysis. A SWOT analysis is where a company identifies their strengths, their weaknesses, their opportunities, and threats. Here, opportunities should mimic whatever their weaknesses are and combat them, and the strengths should be able to combat or overcome or diminish the threats that the company may face. As we said earlier, competitive advantages are very important for a company. Very successful companies employ very distinct competitive advantages where customers and consumers understand exactly what they are getting, and these competitive advantages create economic value for customers. The economic value is the perceived difference between the price that the consumer is paying and the full economic cost. One example is iPhones. Apple has a distinct competitive advantage with their iPhones, as they have stores where customers can go in and use their Genius Bar when they have problems working with the phone. They also, because they employ an entire OS operating system, Apple has a competitive advantage in the fact that their phones can sync to the iPad, they can sync to the Mac computer, and they can now sync to the Apple Watch. So customers may see a benefit higher than the actual cost of the product, which is why they are willing to pay $900 for a phone, because to them it is perceived value of $1,500 to have all of those items sync cohesively. Sustained versus temporary competitive advantages. So a sustained competitive advantage is one that a company can have for a very long time, if not forever. A temporary one is a competitive advantage that other companies can easily imitate. Sustained competitive advantages are rare and costly to imitate. Temporary ones are not rare and are usually easy to imitate. For example, Barbies. Barbies, while other companies have come out with figures that kids can dress, Barbie has always had a distinct competitive advantage based on the companies that they partner with and their name. Because it is a historical name, it is something that is going to be very hard, it's very rare to get that name, a name that is that recognizable, and it's going to be very costly to imitate something that has that historical legacy. Whereas fidget spinners, which are a newer invention for children these days, after the first fidget spinner came out, there were many imitation fidget spinners that came out by other companies because these toys do not have a historical name and advantage, and the fidget spinner almost became like a Kleenex version where everyone calls most tissues Kleenex. Everyone called whatever looked like a fidget spinner, even if it wasn't the actual brand name. When you have a competitive advantage, you have to be able to measure this advantage that you have. There are two ways to do this, and you can do it through the accounting performance of the company or through the economic performance of the company. When you measure it in the accounting performance, you calculate ratios and percentages based on financial reports that are public for the company. These ratios and percentages can be compared across years that the company is in business. So compare 2005 to 2015, see where you're doing and if your competitive advantage has given you more sales, or you can do it across other companies. So Barbie could calculate ratios and percentages based on profits and earnings against other products in the industry, such as the Bratz dolls. Economic performance is when a firm compares the level of return that they receive for their products or services against the cost of capital. This is basically the performance that it's the performance level that a company needs to be at to meet the objectives of stakeholders, and these are the debt holders and the equity holders of the company. Companies must continually evaluate their external environments. These are very important as the industry is always going to be changing as well as the world. In the general environment, companies really have to pay attention to trends in technology, changes in demographics in their industry as well as in the world, cultural norms. So as the demographics change, as the culture changes, can they continue to sell their products the same way? The economic climate of the world and the industry they are in is there a downfall? Are people losing their jobs? Legally, are there issues within the industry, within the environment, and the political conditions that are going on in a country can definitely affect how a company can pursue business, as well as international events that are going on may lead to higher or lower needs of production for certain things as well. The structure conduct performance model is a model that can help define the theoretical framework for describing relationships between the environment, the company's behavior in the environment, and the performance that the company achieves through the structure and their behavior. Structure refers to the number of competitors in the industry, the heterogeneity of the products that are in the industry, as well as the cost of entry and exit in the industry, etc. Conduct is the behavior, but it's also the implemented strategies by the company. So these are the strategies that the companies implement to have a competitive advantage. And then the performance of the company can be measured based on those their achievements. And a company is really going to want to focus on their individual performance as well as the economy performance, because the economy performance is going to give them idea of what's going on outside their realm and how other companies are doing, and that's just a really good thing for them to know, to stay on top of how and where they're doing in the external environment. There are always going to be threats in the external environments, and as I noted in the SWOT analysis, companies need to be aware of these and identify them. Threats from new competition, especially in markets where it's easy to enter and exit. Existing competitors that are already there if they make technological changes. Substitutes for products. So now that the milk industry has started declining a little bit because people are drinking milk substitutes like almond milk, cashew milk, things like that. Supplier leverage. So suppliers of products are starting to leverage some power, or they could leverage power and increase purchase prices. Buyers can also influence the price of products if they aren't willing to pay a price, or if they aren't willing to purchase a product of a certain quality. They may influence a company to change. Environmental threats are always available, as we've seen with the hurricanes in the past year. They are huge threats to companies that operate down there. And then complementing products. If the complementing products are not available, then customers may not purchase them. Or if they are available but not set at the right price, or have threats from any of these other issues as well, customers may not purchase them. Complementing products are those that go with other ones. So purchasing a card as well as gift wrap for a birthday gift. These are complementing products, the gift wrap and the birthday card. Firms have opportunities to do well, to make some changes in fragmented, emerging, and mature industries. Firms can consolidate by purchasing other firms that are they can consolidate by making their company smaller and really focusing the money where it needs to be. They can be a first mover in their industry by making technological changes either within the company or within the product. They may refine their product offerings. So instead of offering 7 different kinds of something of a product, they may only offer 3 products that are like that are their best sellers to reduce costs. Companies that are in these industries can invest in customer service, as customers may be willing to pay more money and may focus more on these companies that have customer service that they can reach out to and utilize when they need help. And they can also use process innovation to reduce costs within the company, or to increase the quality of a product. In declining industries, the opportunities are a little bit different. A company is either going to want to take leadership and lead the whole industry and how they are all going to go out of business. A company can become a niche, so they can, instead of like when their type of vacuum cleaner goes out of purchase availability, they can be the only person or company to provide the parts to repair it and fix it. And then there are also harvest opportunities and divestment opportunities, where a company may either purchase or sell off many parts of its company, especially in regards to equipment and inventory, to other companies that may be able to use it in a different way and possibly in a different industry. There are 2 ways where companies look inside of themselves to look at their internal capabilities. The first is the resource-based view, which is used a lot less in the VRO framework, but we'll talk about it first. The resource-based view is a model of firm performance that focuses on the resources. These are the tangible and intangible assets and capabilities, which are how these assets enable a firm to take advantage of the resources it controls to get a competitive advantage. This doesn't always work as a way to measure internal capabilities, especially as different departments and different companies have different capabilities and resources. It makes it really difficult to compare. The other way to measure internal capabilities is the VRIO framework. So in this, the V stands for value, the R stands for rarity, the I stands for imitatability, and the O stands for organization. All of these are very, very important in measuring this. Value it's how it creates value for the firm, how it gives them more. Rarity is how easy this is to find. So when we get to talking about other areas of competitive advantages, when we're discussing mergers and acquisitions and things, having these rare capabilities that induce a company to have competitive advantages is just very helpful. Imitatability. So even if say competitive advantage isn't rare, but other companies cannot imitate it based on the history of the company. So like I said with Barbie, even though other people can make dolls for girls to play with cute clothes that have, you know, everything else that Barbie has, Barbie has a name, they have a reputation, and so you can't imitate that. You can't exactly replicate it, and it's always going to be a very big competitive advantage for them. And then finally, organization. So even if a company can steal your idea for a competitive advantage, a competitor can do that. The way the company is organized plays a huge role. So, you know, how incentives are paid to salespeople, company culture, company history, and how it was started, company values. The organization plays a huge role in how a company can get a competitive advantage, how it can achieve a sustained competitive advantage, and then possibly how it can even lose a competitive advantage. We now are getting into the idea of business level strategies. Business level strategies are actions that firms take to gain competitive advantages in a single market or industry. This is defined by Barney and Hesterly, 2015. The one we are going to talk about right now is cost leadership, which focuses on gaining advantages by reducing the company costs to produce the product or provide the service below that of all of its competitors. So it's not actually competing on the price of the product, but the cost to produce the product or provide the service. In this case, if a company is introducing cost leadership as their business level strategy, they will be able to gain more profit per product or per service provided than their competitors, because the original company uses less money to produce the product or service, so they will get more profit per each product if they sell it for the same price. They could also sell it for a less price and introduce or in order to gain more of the market share, so just reducing the cost to produce the product and reducing the price that the consumers purchase the product for. The company can get more profit, as well as can take more of the market share from other competitors. There are many sources of cost leadership, some of which are economies of scale, where a company, as they produce more of the products, or as the company increases and the volume of production increases, there are lower costs per unit produced. In this case, as each unit of product is produced, it costs less to make that next one, because you are you have more equipment that is specialized for the production. You can increase employee specialization, so they are better at their job and better at making that product. As well as when you are producing more, you can spread the overhead costs throughout through more products. In other cases, it might be important to not achieve the ultimate economy of scale. For some, cost leadership is not achieving the economy of scale because other companies have gotten so big that they now have diseconomies of scale, where each time they produce another product, because there is demand, they are losing money. They are not being efficient by making more products. Another source is learning curves and experience differences between companies. Learning curves are where each time a product is produced by an employee, the time it takes to produce that product decreases, which means less labor hours of input per product. And as the learning curve increases, less and less time is used to make those products, and companies get much more efficient at producing them. In reality, the first firm that can move down the learning curve the fastest gets a cost advantage over their competitors. They will have higher levels of production with less worker input costs. There are also, another source of cost leadership is achieving low-cost access to the inputs. These are any supplies that a firm uses to run its business, whether it's raw material, labors, land, capital. Anyone who can get that for the lowest cost is going to get a cost leadership advantage. Then there's also the technological advantages and this is independent of scale. Companies that have technological hardware, like machines and equipment, but software can be a very rare source of cost leadership. And finally, policies are a very good source of cost leadership. Policies such as how the limited scope of the products or services, where the company puts themselves in regards to producing those things is very important. The value of a cost leadership advantage, it is a capability that enables a firm to neutralize its external threats or exploit other external opportunities. So do these cost leadership ways give us value? I would say so. Because when you reduce your cost to produce, you can reduce the threat of new companies entering the industry, because there's cost-based barriers, because if they can't produce the products at a price that you can, then it's going to be really hard for them to gain profit. It also reduces the threat of rivalry, because if your competitors know that you can lower your price and still make a profit to compete with them, then they are less likely to wage price wars with you. And additionally, cost leaders can keep products at prices that attract customers to their products over other substitutes in the industry. And overall, just cost leadership and just having the right team behind it can really give you that. So there are a few that are a little bit more of a sustained competitive advantage. Within the industry, differential access to inputs and technological software can be more sustained competitive advantages over the other sources, but again, it really works with how the company implements that, which is organizing and implementing cost leadership. Really, the culture within a company is what's really going to drive this. So this is the organizational structure, so having fewer layers, simple reporting relationships, and narrow business focus as an organization really helps push cost leadership, as well as management controls, tight control of the systems of where you're spending money, close supervision to the labor, time spent doing the labor, materials that are on hand, and how inventory is stored. And then, like I said, the culture and philosophy is really important. Walmart is a big example of this, as even their corporate headquarters are not flashy. They do not have big Walmart really strives for low cost. They are not flashy, unlike where we saw in recent news where Ben Carson, the political leader under Trump's group, who tried to purchase a $30,000 dining table for his, or desk for his office, and that's spending taxpayer money. That is not a cost leadership. That is spending money that is unnecessary. And finally, the compensation policies at an organization for reducing costs. So you want to give rewards to groups of individuals, as well as individuals who have cost reduction ideas, whether it's substituting different materials, a different process. And when there's a different process, you do have to allow for an increase in labor cost for that learning curve, but to understand that it will decrease the overall cost of the company in the long run. Another business level strategy is product differentiation. Product differentiation is where companies gain a competitive advantage by increasing the perceived value of their products or services against the value of other firms. And this is, again, a perceived value and not an actual value or difference. So some of the sources of product differentiation can be product features, the complexity of a project or a product, the timing of a product introduction. So if when the product is introduced first, or if it's introduced during a time where people really need it, you can get a differentiation that way. The location that you are selling the product at, any kind of customization you allow for consumers to do. Marketing, which is a really big one, because you can market products to be different even if they are exactly the same as the generic product. People tend to always choose the name brand one, even if the generic one is exactly the same, the packaging is just different. Product reputation, so as we've seen in recent years where online reviews have become more prominent, that's a way to differentiation products. Links among functions within a firm, so this is where we talked about Apple previously with the iPhone linking with the iPad and the Mac computer and the Apple Watch. All of those linkings gives Apple a product differentiation. Linking with other firms' products, so the way different apps can link to only Apple devices. Product mix, so again, as we speak with Apple, again, just having all those products that work together. The distribution channels, so being able to distribute your product differently or in specific ways can be differentiation. And then the service and support provided for the product or service, so customer support is a really big one here. Again, does product differentiation bring value? Yes, because it can reduce the threat of new entrants, because other companies in the industry have to be creative and try to make their product different from yours. And that brings a lot of cost as they are trying to do market research to figure out what products customers are going to like and what they want to see and how they can beat yours. It reduces the threat of rivalry, because other companies have to really carve out a niche. They have to be unique, and that can be difficult to do when you see a product that's being very well received, trying to make something different that will be received. It's harder for substitutes to come in because you've already made your product the most attractive one. So while Android phones now are gaining, your Android operating systems are gaining, iPhones are still the most sold phone Android operating systems are increasing, but the most sold phone is still an Apple. And then it reduces the threat of buyers and suppliers because you have loyal customers to your unique product, and you kind of have a quasi-monopoly in that area. Do you have a sustained competitive advantage? If the rarity of the product differentiation, it depends on if other firms are creative enough to differentiate their products in ways that customers will receive them well. And then imitatability. So can it be completely duplicated? Well, let's hope you have patents so it can't be exactly duplicated. Can it be imitated, or can there be substitutes? Yeah, there can be substitutes, but they have to be creative enough. Like we said, it's really going to it's really hard for entrants to come in and make something that's going to be different. In organizing the company in a specific way, these are more like cross-divisional product development teams. There are really creative efforts going on in product differentiation companies instead of just focusing on reducing cost. Management has lots of decision-making guidelines. There's lots of freedom to be creative. And then companies usually have policies of experimentation. Employees are rewarded for taking risks. They aren't punished for failures, but they're rewarded for their big risks and their idea changes. Creativeness is just highly sought after, and you look at different kinds of performance measurement for each of the employees. And then the final question of, can you implement both product differentiation and cost leadership? I think yes, you can. I don't think every company does, but yes, you can. While it will be difficult, I think you kind of have to start with the creative side and getting the products that you want to make and you want to produce, but then you figure out how to reduce costs to make those products bigger profit makers, where you can really push the competitors out, but based on your cost and how much money you are making. But I think it's difficult, and it's a fine balance that not every company can do and figure out how to implement correctly. Now we are transitioning into the corporate strategies. One of the corporate strategies is vertical integration. Corporate strategies are unlike business strategies where a company is operating in a single industry. This is where a company is operating in multiple markets or industries at the same time and trying to be competitive and have competitive advantages in all of them. So vertical integration is integration within the value chain. So this is within the chain that creates value in the product or service. So forward integration is when a company incorporates more stages of the value chain that take it closer to the end of the value chain where it's directly impacting the consumers. So imagine a company that curates raw materials, forward integrating, so bringing more companies under its umbrella to where they now don't only curate the raw materials, but they produce the product, and they sell it and own the stores that the product is sold in. Backward integration is where is almost the direct opposite. So it would be where a store that has just been selling other companies' items goes back and integrates and purchases the company that produces the product, and then the company that curates the raw materials. And so that's the difference between forward and backward integration. The value that this creates is it reduces the ability to be exploited because the supply chain is all under one umbrella, so companies can't be exploited for the cost of raw materials. If there's a shortage, the whole company will feel it, and they won't be exploited by it. It increases the firm capabilities, which makes it harder for other companies to imitate, and this is usually pretty rare, so they can take advantage of this. And then the thing with flexibility is it does make a company less flexible, but you only need a flexible firm when the situations are very uncertain. So if you are in a very certain or prominent industry, then you might be able to get away with having less flexibility, and the advantages of having everything that integrated may outweigh the inflexibilityness of vertical integration. This is usually rare because not all competitors can integrate because of the transaction-specific investments that this requires a firm to go through when they integrate, as well as it's really hard to imitate because of those transaction-specific events, as well as there are a few ways that they can substitute this with strategic alliances, but strategic alliances aren't quite as certain as vertical integration. In order for a company to be successful at this, then the organizational structure needs to be able to support it. So they must be able to resolve conflict within the culture and within strategy implementation across the various companies that have been integrated together. Management controls need to be in place that coordinate the budget, and management oversight needs, which may be different within the different firms, needs to come under coordinated arenas and be synchronized within all the companies so that everyone is being managed the same way. And then compensation. So companies may have been compensating employees differently, such as if one was a product differentiation and one was a cost leadership. So and it's not only just those, it's in regards to salaries, how much people at different levels make, job titles, 401k investments, bonuses that are paid out to employees, like we said, based on cost leadership ideas or product differentiation ideas. But when you do vertically integrate, you're asking your employees to make firm-specific investments within their roles and within their jobs and their careers. So you really need to be able to invest in them for making those decisions and helping increase the value of the firm. Another corporate strategy is corporate diversification. This happens when a company operates in multiple industries or markets simultaneously. There are two different types of diversification strategies. The first is a product diversification strategy where a firm operates in multiple industries at the same time. The other one is when a firm operates in multiple geographic markets at the same time, so operating in different countries or different states, different regions. And then the third thing is companies can do both of these, where they implement a product market diversification strategy where they have different products and are operating in different geographic markets. Then there are the different types of corporate diversification based on how related or unrelated the products are. In a limited corporate diversification, almost all of the business activities are within a single industry. An example of this would be tropical jays in Hawaii, where all they do is create shades and umbrellas. So they are very limited in that they do all of their work in Hawaii, as well as everything is in shading people. So umbrellas, large shades, large shade structures. Related diversification is when less than 70% of a firm's revenue comes from a single product market, and the firm is diversified in multiple lines of business. An example of this would be the Wave Storm brand, where they operate in lots of water-related activities. Unrelated is when less than 70% of a firm's revenue is generated in a single product market, when different businesses don't share very many commonalities, and this is unrelated diversification. An example of this is Secra Valhermoso SA. It's a Spanish firm that was created in 2003 after a merger between Secra, which is a Spanish construction company, and Valhermoso, a Spanish housing company. The new CEO of the new firm, the combined companies, adopted an aggressive, unrelated diversification into multi-services and energy businesses. This is as noted by Almudena Martinez Campillo's article that is published in Leadership Journal in 2014. The value of a corporate diversification is creating economies of scope, not scale, but scope, into the relation of the number of businesses managed, as long as these businesses increase their revenues and decrease costs. Common input activities, production activities, storage, distribution, sales, marketing, support, and services, these can all create economies of scope within the company, even if they are diversified. This diversification can only be successful if equity holders gain more with the company's diversification strategy, as opposed to them inputting their own diversification in their own portfolios. Is this a sustained competitive advantage? Rarity is slightly yes. It can create, and depends on the economies of scope that are created. And it's really that economies of scope is going to be highly valuable here. And imitatability, there could be direct duplication. It just depends on how costly it is for other companies to gain these economies of scope. But as we've noted earlier, companies can also create strategic alliances. These are my references for the project: the textbook, Barney and Hesterly, and then 2 peer-reviewed journals, European Research Studies and Leadership.